Alright guys, so I'm going to review with you what is a function and a non-function. So remember here that for every input there's exactly one output. So essentially what that means is for every x there's exactly one y. So an x can't have two different y's. So the way that I would tell you to do this is I would say that x's can't repeat, so that's what you're looking for. So there's three different ways that you're looking here. The first one here is a mapping. So this right here would be a mapping. And let's say that this is maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and 7. Alright, so you would see this with a line drawn maybe like this. And you would think to yourself, okay, is this a function? Well, if I were to write these points out, it would be 1, 5, 1, 6, 2, 6, 3, 7, and 4, 7. So if I'm looking at these ordered pairs, this is your x or your domain, and this is your y, or sometimes you'll hear that called the range. You might even see this called x, and if it is a function, they would say f of x. Now, if they write f of x, they're telling you it is a function, so that necessarily won't be there. If it is, Merry Christmas, they've told you it's a function. But I can't write this one here because it's not a function. As we can see here, this one repeats, so therefore this would not be a function. So it's kind of easy to tell. If we go down here to the set of ordered pairs, we see we have a 1, a 3, a 2, and a 4 for our inputs or our x values. So this one would be a function. So that's a yes. Okay? And then you could have a table, and you're looking for the same thing. So let's say this was -1, 4, 0, 5, 2, 4, 3, 6. And if we look at just the x's, we see that that is a function because they don't repeat. Now, you'll notice that the 4's repeat there. And if you'll notice in the first example here, the mapping, that the 6's repeat and the 7's repeat. That's okay. And you'll see why in just a second when we talk about the graphing part of it. But that is okay to have the y's repeating. It's just your x can't repeat. Okay? All right. So now let's take a look at what it would look like in a graph. So we know that because every input has exactly one output, a graph of a function will pass the vertical line test. So the vertical line test says that if you pass the vertical line through it, that you will only hit through it, meaning the graph of the equation, whatever it is, so that when you pass a line through that it will only hit the graph one time. So if I have, let's say, a point here, right there, and then maybe one here. It is not liking my pen, so we'll change this to a marker here. So one here, 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 and then maybe back up here. This would be a function, and it would be a function because if I connect those dots and I pass a vertical line through it, we're going to see that it only hits that graph one time. So if I run like a vertical line through this, and we know that I'm not good at drawing a straight line, that it's going to hit one time here, one time. There's no time on this graph that it's going to hit more than one time. So that would be a function. Now, let's say that you have another graph and it has dots like this. There's one here. I'm going to make this a little thicker so you can see it. Okay, I may have made it too thick, but we'll try it. Here, here, and then it comes back here, and then here again, and I'm going to put a dot there. So then you would draw this. Here would be the graph of this function, and I missed, so we will undo that little mark there and do it again. Oh, I'm just having a hard time here because it's not a straight line. And that goes back to our linear. Okay, so here would be the graph of this function. So again, if I pass a vertical line through this, you'll notice that this hits twice. Okay, this hits twice. Here, here, and it hits 2 times with a vertical line. So this would not be a function. Okay. Now, so basically what you're looking for is it to pass that vertical line test and not hit twice. So these can get, pretty complicated depending on what you're drawing. So you might have one that goes like this. This would be fine because it would pass the vertical line test. If you passed a vertical line through it, notice again that it only hits 1 time. Okay? Now, where people are kind of making mistakes sometimes is that they'll go in here and they like to be very precise and make this nice U, which we know is an x squared graph. We'll talk about that in a second. Is the U is what they're trying to make. But actually, the mistake becomes when you do this, notice that you have 2 lines. Let me do that again. You have 2 dots that are directly over one another. So though you can't tell it because you sketched it like this, you actually have, if you pass the vertical line through it, right there, where x is -3, you actually do hit 2 dots twice. So by doing this and not being careful, you've actually drawn something that's not a function. Okay? All right, so let's talk about how we can go about this type of question here. So let's say that you are asked, is it a function, and you're only given an equation. So most of the time we won't be asked this too in depth because there's tons of functions out there. Because remember, you have functions and non-functions, but there are many, many, many things that are functions. And we talk about linear functions, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So if we know what shape the graph makes, or a sketch of the graph, then we can tell if it's a function. We can also tell by plugging some points in. So we know that y equals mx plus b. This is a line, okay? And so it can go this way, this way, this way. Those are all lines. These are linear functions. The only line that you would see on a graph that's not a function is a vertical line. And the reason that a vertical line is not a function is because it won't pass the vertical line test. It lines exactly up with the vertical line, so it wouldn't pass a vertical line test. So these 3 are functions, but this one right here, the vertical line, and it's always x equals k would be kind of the equation there. So y equals mx plus b, that is a linear function. Now we're going to talk about how we're adding that linear term here in just a second. So this is a linear function. And we've talked before about things like y equals x squared. We know to sketch that graph, it does make a U, again, not with 2 dots vertically. This is called a parabola. It's a quadratic, so this, yes, would be a function. Now, if we have x equals y squared, that graph would make this shape, this U. As you can see, this is going to hit if I draw a vertical line twice, so that one would not be a function. You have y equals x cubed, and we know that it kind of makes like this graph. This is not vertically, so this would, yes, be a function. You have y equals the absolute value of x, and that graph makes a V, remember, because absolute value is the distance from 0, so it's positive once it's in the bars, so this would be a function also. So these are just knowing the ideas of what those graphs look like helps you decide if it's a function or not. If you're not sure, substitute in some points and see if you can get the extra repeat. So if you plug in x value and you can get 2 different y values, then that would not be a function. Okay. For instance, here, if I substitute a 1 for x, and then what number squared would be a 1, that's going to get me 1 or negative 1. So 1, 1, 1, negative 1, and that would not work because 1 would go with a 1 and a negative 1. So this one, the y squared, would not be 1. All right, so on your test, they actually ask you to draw a function, usually. And so basically, you can draw anything that will pass the vertical line test. So my advice is to just draw a y equals mx plus b equation. That would be a function. You could draw something like, this here would be a function. That would be fine, okay? What you can't do, and what we have people doing, is trying to be intricate and draw this and you're drawing a vertical line in the process. That is not a function if you have 2 dots vertically. One of the ones I've seen is like this. And this is not a function. There, it would not pass the vertical line of test. You see the vertical line in it. So that would not be a function. This one would be a function. Okay? So also you could just draw a vertical line on the graph. Make sure it's completely vertical, and it would be a non-function if you're asked to draw a non-function. Remember, if you're asked to draw a function, it's got to be, like this or like this. That would be fine. It's got to pass the vertical line test. So run a vertical line through whatever you draw and see if it hits 2 of the dots that you plotted. The other thing, if you're writing in a table, you can pretty much make up anything as long as your x's don't repeat. Okay? If you're asked to do a mapping, as long as 2 things are not coming from that x, you've actually drawn a function. Okay? Hope this helps.